it's very interesting because we don't know yet about her past, and I think this is in the process of being created. I have my own idea and backstory.
She once said something that nobody in Hollywood says. I love the life of an actor because you spend brief amounts of time with other people and then you just leave. I need to be alone a lot and I need the outdoors. Think about that. This wasn't some indie recluse or art house loner. This was a woman who had starred alongside Daniel Day-Lewis, Bruce Willis, Brad Pitt, Jack Nicholson, and Kevin Costner. People magazine named her one of the 50 most beautiful people on the planet. Empire magazine ranked her among the 100 sexiest stars in film history. Every major studio in town was calling. And the thing she valued most about her job was the leaving. Not the premieres, not the covers, not the applause. The clean exit at the end. How do you survive an industry that demands constant exposure when the thing you crave most in the world is disappearance? And what happens when those two forces finally collide? Let's fade to black. There is a kind of vanishing that Hollywood has never known how to explain. Not the burnout, not the scandal, not the spiral. Those are stories the industry understands. What it doesn't understand is a woman who simply decides she's had enough. Not of failure, of success. Madeleine Stowe didn't crash. She didn't flame out. At the peak of her career, after starring in some of the decade's most acclaimed films, earning award nominations, and possessing the kind of face that could open a movie on name alone, she packed her life into a cattle ranch in the middle of Texas and disappeared for nearly a decade. The easy explanation is motherhood, and there's truth in that, but the real story is older. It starts in a house in Eagle Rock, with a father whose body was betraying him in the dark, and a piano teacher who gave his final lessons from behind a trellis because he was too ill to sit in the same room as his student. Madeleine Stowe was born on August 18, 1958, in Los Angeles. Her mother, Maria, came from a prominent political family in Costa Rica. Her father, Robert, was a civil engineer from Oregon. They settled in Eagle Rock, a working-class pocket of the city, about as far from the Hollywood sign as you could get while technically still living in LA. When Madeleine was 4, her father was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. She later recalled the seizures in the middle of the night. The neighbors rushing in at 2 and 3 in the morning, no questions asked. A small child watching the person she depended on most lose control of his own body, again and again in the dark. It did what that kind of thing does to a child. It turned her inward, not shy exactly, but guarded. The kind of quiet that isn't about having nothing to say, it's about learning early that the world is not entirely safe. At 10, she found a door out of that silence. The piano. Her teacher was Sergei Tarnowski, a Russian-born concert pianist who had once taught Vladimir Horowitz. He was already in his 80s, living in a small home near Wilton in Hollywood. She later described him in terms that say more about her childhood than any interview she ever gave. He was really my father, I think. She practiced for hours every day, not to perform, not to impress anyone, to disappear. She said it plainly. The piano was a means to escape having to socialize with other children her age. It was a way of being brilliant in private, of excelling without exposure. For 7 years, Tarnowski was her anchor. Then he grew ill. In their final lessons, he taught her from behind a trellis in his sunroom. She could hear his voice but couldn't see him. He was lucid. The lessons were beautiful. On the last day, she sensed she would never see him again. She walked to the trellis to say goodbye. Her mouth began to quiver, but she couldn't bring herself to cross to the other side. She didn't hug him. She stood at the edge of the only real intimacy she trusted, and she held back. He died shortly after. He was 92, and Madeleine Stowe never played the piano seriously again. She said simply, "I just felt it was time to not be by myself anymore." But the instinct, the one that told her to stand close enough to feel everything, never quite step across. That instinct was already permanent. Without music, Stowe drifted. She enrolled at the University of Southern California to study cinema and journalism, but the classes didn't stick. What caught her was the Sulceris Theater in Beverly Hills, where she volunteered to perform. Not because she dreamed of stardom, because she needed somewhere to be. A movie agent happened to be in the audience one evening. Before she'd finished college, she was booking television work, guest spots on Beretta, The Amazing Spider-Man, Little House on the Prairie. She married actor Brian Benben in 1982 after meeting him on the NBC miniseries The Gangster Chronicles, and settled into the kind of working actress life that Hollywood produces by the thousands. Reliable, invisible, then everything changed. In 1987, Stowe was cast opposite Richard Dreyfuss and Emilio Estevez in a comedy called Stakeout. It opened at #1 at the box office. Overnight, she had something she'd never chased: visibility. What she did next is the first real clue to who she was. Instead of riding the momentum, she took a role in Closetland, a two-person chamber piece opposite Alan Rickman about a woman being psychologically tortured by a state interrogator. The film made $259,000. Almost nobody saw it. But Stowe wasn't thinking about box office. She was drawn to a character who was stripped of every defense, locked in a room, and who refused to break. The woman in Closetland is offered a way out, confess, and she chooses to endure instead. The pattern was beginning to form. Stowe wasn't interested in fame. She was drawn to characters who resisted, who held their ground, who protected something inside themselves that the world was trying to take. At least, that's what it looked like. 1992 changed everything. Michael Mann cast her as Cora Munro in The Last of the Mohicans opposite Daniel Day-Lewis. Stowe almost turned it down. In the 90s, action pictures were all the rage, she later said. As a woman, I was fed up with them. I initially thought the script was just another action film dressed up as a period piece. Then she met Mann. When Michael began speaking about the character's inner life, it was clear that his own inner life was strong. I saw Cora in a completely different light. The shoot was grueling. North Carolina mountains, natural light. Day-Lewis in full method immersion, learning to skin animals and fire a flintlock on the run. And in the middle of all that chaos, Stowe delivered something that went beyond a performance. Her Cora wasn't a damsel. She argued, challenged, chose. In the film's most iconic moment, behind the waterfall, as Hawkeye tells her to stay alive, her face carried something deeper than fear. It carried the weight of a woman deciding to trust someone, fully, for what felt like the first time. The film grossed over $140 million. Stowe became an A-list star. But the thing about standing in the waterfall is that eventually you have to step out of it. The next year, Robert Altman cast her in Short Cuts. She'd originally been offered the part that went to Julianne Moore, a role requiring extended nudity during a long domestic argument. Stowe declined, not from modesty, but because she felt she'd be too self-conscious to stay emotionally present while physically exposed. It was an honest admission. She needed a layer of protection in order to be vulnerable. Altman gave her a different role instead, the wife of a compulsively lying cop played by Tim Robbins. It became one of her finest performances. There's a scene where Robbins constructs an absurdly elaborate lie, and Stowe simply erupts into laughter. Spontaneous, unguarded, the kind of laugh that broke loose before the actress could catch it. She won the National Society of Film Critics Award for Best Supporting Actress. Then came the peak, and the problem. Between 1994 and 1996, Stowe was everywhere. Blink, Bad Girls, China Moon, 12 Monkeys with Bruce Willis and Brad Pitt. People magazine, Empire magazine. She was one of the most visible women in Hollywood. But for every 12 monkeys, there was a Bad Girls, critically destroyed and commercially dead. For every Short Cuts, there was a China Moon, shelved for 3 years before being quietly dumped into theaters. She was famous. She was working constantly. and she was losing the thing that had drawn her to acting in the first place: the quiet. The reality was more complicated than anyone on the outside could see. In 1996, her daughter May was born. And somewhere between the delivery room and the first sleepless night, something shifted. She didn't announce a retirement. She and Brian Benben simply bought a ranch outside Fredericksburg, Texas, and left Los Angeles. For 3 years, she didn't make a single film. When she resurfaced with the proposition in 1998, the momentum was gone. Hollywood doesn't wait. The General's Daughter was a hit, but it was a John Travolta vehicle. Stowe was supporting furniture. Imposter in 2001 was a disaster. Avenging Angelo in 2002 was worse. We Were Soldiers gave her a dignified but peripheral role as a military wife who mostly waits by the telephone. By 2003, she had vanished. She told People magazine, "I never thought I'm retiring, but I didn't feel that thing revving in me. I was much more focused on May." Then she paused. It was frustrating at times. That honesty is the key. Buried in the contentment was an ache. She hadn't stopped wanting it. She'd just decided that wanting it was too dangerous. For 8 years, she lived on the ranch. Then, in 2011, ABC cast her as Victoria Grayson in Revenge. It was the role she'd been rehearsing her entire life. Victoria was a woman who had built an immaculate surface, the wardrobe, the estate, the calculated smile, to protect a devastated interior. She lied, she manipulated, she destroyed anyone who threatened the wall, and in Stowe's hands, she was heartbreaking. Because beneath the ice, you could always sense the wound. The show was a hit. She earned a Golden Globe nomination. For 4 seasons, she dominated every scene she was in, reminding audiences of what they'd been missing for a decade. When Revenge ended in 2015, she disappeared again. So here is the question we opened with. Why does Madeleine Stowe keep walking away? Look at the evidence. A child who watched her father's body betray him in the dark and learned that dependence comes with loss. A teenager who found her only safety alone at a piano, in a room with a dying man who could read her without asking her to speak. A young woman who entered acting not out of ambition, but because an agent happened to be in the audience one night. A star who admitted that the thing she loved most about her profession was the leaving, and then the trellis. The image that explains everything. A 17-year-old girl standing close enough to feel the warmth of someone she loved, close enough that her mouth trembled with everything she wanted to say, and choosing not to cross. Every departure in her career follows the same architecture. The piano dies with Tarnowski. The film career stalls when motherhood offers a safer form of love. The Revenge comeback ends and she vanishes back to Texas, where the sky is wide and the silence is honest and nobody is asking her to open up for a camera. Hollywood rewards the opposite instinct. It rewards hunger and relentlessness and the willingness to keep showing up even when the work is thin and the machinery is grinding you down. It rewards people who want visibility more than anything. Madeleine Stowe never wanted visibility more than anything. She wanted to feel safe. And when the career and the safety couldn't coexist, she chose the one that Hollywood has never been able to offer. It wasn't a fall. It was the most consistent decision she ever made, repeated across 5 decades in every room she ever entered. Get close, do extraordinary work, and before anyone can reach in and take what you're protecting, leave. She surfaced again recently in the HBO series Welcome to Derry. She still lives on the ranch. She still moves on her own terms. Perhaps the most remarkable thing about Madeleine Stowe isn't what she accomplished in an industry built on exposure. It's that she managed, against every pressure it applied, to stay hidden in plain sight for 40 years, and somehow made that hiding look like grace. Thank you for watching, and as ever, I look forward to seeing you in the next one.